Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beastly Talks. I am your host, Stian Helling, and I'm going to be talking about something that I have very strong opinions on and I'm very passionate about because it is probably one of the absolute biggest sources of behavioral issues and frustrations in both people and dogs. And I'm going to argue it's also an insanely big part of anxiety in so many dogs in this day and age. And I am, of course, talking about the curse of freedom. So, what do I mean when I say the curse of freedom? Well, in very simple terms, I mean a dog that has way too much freedom, way too many opportunities to make poor decisions, and far too little structure and management in its life to actually learn how to behave as a good dog and not just a feral little asshole. So we're going to talk a lot about this today, the issues that too much freedom leads to, and then like a couple of different scenarios where it's super important to have a lot of structure and management in place, and then towards the end we'll get into a little bit of how do we actually introduce this to a dog? How do we start working through these problems? And how do we eliminate all of these crappy behaviors that we tend to see around everywhere? So, the curse of freedom. Again, when you have a new puppy arrive at your house, so this primarily applies to puppies, obviously very young dogs that are just empty brains who don't know how to do anything correct yet. They just know how to be a feral little puppy. But it also applies to new dogs, right? So whether you have got a new dog from a shelter or from a rescue group, a lot of these dogs ended up in shelters or rescues because they've already had too much freedom and they've learned to make so many mistakes to the point where someone has given them up because they just straight up can't deal with the dog anymore, right? And a lot of the behavioral issues that come from too much freedom, like reactivity. I've seen a ton of resource guiding that has been learned through not having enough structure or rules. I've seen a lot of multi-dog households, fighting. So what I often refer to as in-home fighting, where just a bunch of dogs are allowed to do whatever they want, and that leads to whether it's power struggles, whether it's overarousal and anxiety, which in turn leads to the dogs fighting each other and other types of aggression. I've seen a ton of frustration, both in humans and dogs. A lot of stress and anxiety, again, both in dogs and humans. Particularly, we tend to see a lot of separation anxiety because these dogs are just never taught to be by themselves and do nothing. Destructive behavior, very, very common problem. Counter surfing, another big problem where the dog essentially jumps on the counter and eats whatever it is that is there. Because again, they have no fucking rules or structure to abide to. And finally, puppy toileting. So puppies going to the toilet inside. Like all of these problems, they essentially come from having too much freedom to begin with, and from not implementing the structure and management that an apex predator, keep in mind, your dog is not a fucking fur baby. It's an apex predator with 42 teeth and a desire to hunt and kill, right? We have to appreciate dogs for what they are. That's what makes them so awesome. But if we start treating them like babies, we're going to have so many fucking problems for the rest of the dog's life. So again, in most cases, this applies to any form of new dog that's come into the household, unless, you've had a well-trained dog. Like, say, for example, someone in your family died and you take over the dog and they have good training behind them. Look, there might be a small period of time where there is some grief in the dog, and that can lead to some anxiety. But overall, a dog that has a good understanding of how a household runs and how to behave out and about, they will be able to work through all of that. So again, this is more for new dogs, rescue dogs, shelter dogs, young puppies, and so on and so forth. So what is the problem with too much freedom? Well, very simply put, too much freedom gives the dog too many opportunities to fail, to get something wrong. And this, again, I find it really interesting because I've been to so many houses where they have these absolutely out of control dogs that are backflipping off the chest of guests. They're ripping things up. They're biting kids over their toys. And a lot of these people have children, like even quite young children, that are already really well behaved at a young age. And I walk in and I go like, why did you let this dog do anything that it wanted to? Because obviously you've managed children in the past, right? I don't think I've ever heard of anyone having a 6-month-old toddler and not putting it in a cot when they're not supervising it, right? But for some reason, when it comes to dogs, we have this problem understanding basic things like reinforcement, like punishment, like implementing structure and management. And so we just let the dogs run free and do whatever the hell they want. And again, I think, here's the thing. If you allow a dog to raise itself, there is only one thing that dog can raise itself to be, and that is feral, right? Dogs are still, while they're domesticated animals, while they're incredibly in tune to us, they still have a feral nature. They are still dogs. They want to chase prey. They want to bite things. They want to dig at things. They want to destroy things. They don't understand the concept of under a roof isn't a place that I can go to the toilet where it's outside is. Right? All of these things we have to train into our dogs to steer them in the right direction, to set them up for success. And for some reason, people do this so naturally with human children, but they cannot wrap their heads around it with dogs. And that's exactly why I'm here rambling on about this today. One thing that I think is really important to talk about when we start getting into this kind of stuff is how important and valuable space is to a dog. Aside from, things like food and toys and objects and things, one of the most valuable things to a dog is the space around them or a space that they can control. At the end of the day, pretty much any form of aggression has the purpose of controlling space, whether that is to reduce space or to increase space, whether the dog wants to get to something or wants to get away from something. And when we put a new dog into our house and we say, hey, within these 4 walls, you're not going to wear a collar, you're not going to ever have a leash on you, we're never going to ask anything off you, you're free to run around and do whatever you want, that leads to such a wide host of problems. And I guess us as humans, we kind of have trouble understanding space as a valuable thing. But what I tend to explain to people is all of us, we kind of need our own bubble to be in, right? A lot of people take issue with close talkers, the people that get right up in your face and they're talking to you from, just a couple of centimeters away. And we kind of go like, whoa, holy shit, dude, you're in my space. I need you to back right the fuck up. But another thing is being able to remove yourself from social situations, to go to your own room, to sit down, to, I don't know, listen to music, doom scroll Facebook, whatever it may be. But space is important to us as well, but we don't think of controlling our own space in the same way that dogs do. And a lot of people tend to have trouble wrapping their heads around how incredibly valuable space is for dogs. And it is important to understand that, because this is going to be part of, as I'm going through all of this, you're going to realize more and more why I'm actually talking so much about space. But yeah, again, one of the things that I tend to see so much of when it comes to the curse of freedom is high levels of stress and high levels of anxiety. And stress and anxiety in many situations comes from a couple of things. It comes from having no structure, having no understanding of what the rules are, and never being able to learn how to switch off. So when we talk about switching off, it's talking about a dog that teaching a dog to just go somewhere and lie down and do nothing and just relax. Essentially learning how to be bored. Learning how to be bored is an incredibly valuable skill that, you know, both humans and dogs really need to learn. Like, it's a little bit different for us humans because we invent all these things to occupy our brains all the time to try and get that consistent dopamine release. And again, that also leads to issues for us: anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth. While that's a little bit different, it's along the same vein of dogs and ending up having a lot of stress-related problems and anxieties. And look, there's a few ways that we can kind of relate this to a human being. Um, the first way that I like to think of it is, imagine you get a new job, right? You leave your old job, you get a new job, you get paid a little bit more, you're excited about this, right? And so you walk into the new place, and that's a little bit stressful because you kind of, well, now I need to meet people, I have to be polite, I have to not say anything stupid, I have to give good first impression, etc., etc. I think of this similarly to a dog coming from a shelter, right? So they are in a shelter and they kind of go like, well, this is the only thing that I've known for the last however many weeks or months or years, even in some cases. And then suddenly they get picked up by someone, they get taken into a car, driven to a house, and let go. Now, um, in that situation where you've got yourself a new job, you come in and you try to suss the place out a little bit. And in most cases, a good workplace, what they're going to do is they're going to introduce you to someone, they're going to give you someone that you can ask questions to, and then they're going to give you instructions on how to do your job. But imagine if you walked into a place and you just had a couple of people like to shout your name and like wave at you and drag you over to a desk, sit you down, put down a whole bunch of pile of paperwork and go like, get to work. And you go, I don't know the programs we're using. I don't know what my job actually is. What the hell am I doing here? Now you're going to experience a form of anxiety that goes through the roof, and you're scared to ask, right? And you might try to hint at someone, like someone sitting next to you, like, hey, but what are we actually doing here, right? And that shit is super stressful. Right? So now you're spinning in circles because you're sitting there, you know you're there to do a job, to earn money, to earn a living, and to help out a company, but you have no idea what to do. Imagine the level of stress you're going to be experiencing at that point. Another example that I like to give is the simple act of driving a car, right? Imagine if you were an 18-year-old kid and suddenly someone walks up to you with a set of keys. And let's picture at this point, you've never driven a car. You've never been taught how to change gears, which pedal speeds up the car and which one slows it down. You know nothing. But someone just forks over a set of keys and they go like, hey, hop in this car and drive 50 meters down the road. And you don't even know the traffic rules. right? You have nothing to adhere to. You have no means by which to actually succeed at the task that you're trying to complete. And that ambiguity, that lack of structure and management and a black and white world is going to send your anxiety and stress levels absolutely through the roof. And that is exactly what we tend to see with a lot of dogs. So at the end of the day, management rules and accountability for adhering to those management to the management structure and to the rules. It is what's going to set everything into place for you. Is what's going to remove any form of ambiguity and make your life so much easier. Now, when you have a puppy, you have bought yourself a new puppy, whether that's come from a breeder, whether it's come from a rescue group, doesn't matter. But you've generally been receiving some updates, you've been seeing some photos and videos, you've already started thinking about a name for the dog, right? There is such a high level of excitement at the prospect of getting a new puppy. At least it is for me. I absolutely love raising puppies. And honestly, it has been a very long time since I did raise a puppy. I've had a bunch of puppies that we've fostered and stuff, but they usually been gone in 1 to 2 weeks. And we usually have full litters, which is just an absolute pain. Uh, Still love it, but it's an absolute pain, especially when it comes to management. But you have this new puppy that you're super excited about. The whole family is talking about it. You're sending photos to your mum and dad, and you say, "Oh, it's only a week till this little puppy comes." Now, a week before I get a new puppy, I start locking down everything. The puppies are literally just an empty brain with four paws, a lot of fur, and in many cases, very big desire to bite the hell out of shit, right? And that's what you're bringing into your home. And if you just open your doors to that puppy and you say, "Hey, puppy, go work this place out," you're in for a world of hurt. It's that simple. So while most people are getting excited about the prospect of getting a new puppy, I'm busy locking the place down. I am setting up playpens. I am preparing crates. I am getting toys. I am getting tools, collars, whatever it may be. And I'm securing. Well, look, we don't really have a backyard anymore because we have a massive back paddock. So it's a little bit hard to secure a paddock for a puppy. And again, this is where we come back to management. But when we lived in a smaller place and we had a nice little backyard, I knew the puppies were going to spend a fair bit of time out there. So I started going through that whole backyard and looking for anything that could get the puppy into trouble or hurt them in some way, form, or shape. Little twigs, sharp twigs that are poking out. If a puppy hits that at Mach 10, eyes can go broken. That actually happened to us once. We had a puppy run straight into a twig that I'd missed and injured its eye. It was fine in the end, but there was a lot of vet trips because of it, right? So I spend so much time preparing my house for this new little feral thing to come in. And the management side of things sets me up to toilet train the puppy very quickly, to teach them what's okay and what's not, to make sure I create value in myself by always keeping the puppy near me, and also to give my older dogs a bit of a break, because older dogs need a break. They don't need a puppy in their face, licking them, nipping at them, barking at them to pay attention to them all the time, right? And this is a little bit off the track, but this is actually quite important. If you have an older dog and you're getting a puppy, don't expect the older dog to raise that puppy. Now, there are some older dogs that are quite friendly with puppies and are happy to have a play friend, or just a friend in general. But a lot of older dogs, even if they're not super old, are going to tire very quickly of having a puppy in their face and being a little bit of a brat. And so that's also where you pop the puppy away to go like, "Hey, old fellas, you need to sleep on the couch and have a little bit of a break from the puppy. And so what I tend to see people do is they bring puppy home, they put puppy on the floor, and they say, "Oh my God, everyone, look, the new little puppy is here, woohoo!" Right? And then the puppy starts running around causing fuckery. And the people are spending every waking minute of every single day running after this little feral thing, yelling, "No, no, no," and cleaning up poo from every corner of the house and slipping in pee and screaming, "Don't eat my shoes." And they are completely unprepared for having a puppy in the house. See, I never have to do any of that because I prepare my house so long before the puppy comes and I stick to the structure and the management. Now, this sets the dog up to make minimal mistakes. Don't get me wrong. Even if you have a puppy in a playpen, if you have them confined, you have them in a crate, whatever it may be, they're going to go to the toilet. It's going to happen from time to time, right? Generally, puppies go to the toilet like anywhere from every 30 minutes to every 60 minutes, depending on what they're doing and how much access they have to water, right? And no matter how vigilant you are going to forget from time to time, or you're going to be in the middle of a phone call or cooking dinner and you're going to miss out, right? It happens. Not a big deal. Because when you're managing your puppy properly, what happens is they always go in the same spot. When you have a free roaming puppy, they tend to pee and poo in every single part of the house. And so now your entire house very quickly turns into a toilet. I've worked with 9-month-old, adolescent dogs at this point who have had free roam their whole life. And legit, the people are on a 50-50 schedule for whether or not the dog goes to the toilet inside or outside. If I was cleaning shit up for 6 months, I would lose my mind. I can tell you that for sure. All right, so moving on to the rescue dog situation. So again, puppies just don't know what to do. They are just feral little creatures, and we lock them down to go like, "Hey, I'm going to prevent you from making mistakes, and I'm going to help you get through this as quickly as possible." Now, if you getting a dog from a shelter, an older dog, it might still be a young dog, right? But if you're getting an older dog, chances are that dog already has some behavioral issues. At the end of the day, it's rare that what we would call a good dog ends up in a shelter, because good dogs are just background companions. They're never really in the way. You can do fun stuff with them. You can take them everywhere, and it's not really a problem, right? Now, I have heard of situations where, a person has died and no one else in the family, for whatever reason, can take the dog. And that's when, a so-called good dog would end up in the shelter. But most of the time, they end up in shelters because they have some behavioral issues. They are showing some form of aggression towards kids. They're reactive on the leash. Whatever it may be, the owner is just not capable of dealing with it, and they take them to the shelter because they can't cope anymore. Now, I am going to get a very good friend of mine on to talk about the whole shelter thing in a adopt-on shop, etc., etc. But that's for a future chat. So now, what happens is you go to a shelter, you find yourself a dog. It's a dog that might be barking, in its little pen, jumping up, looking for pats, whatever it may be. And, people fall in love and they go, "Oh my God, this is my dog." So they sign the paperwork. They get the dog on the leash. The dog's wagging its tail. It's panting. It's drooling. It is dragging the new owner on the leash out into the car, jumps into the car, and people start driving home. Now, the thinking that most people have at that point is, "Oh my God, you poor little guy. You have been in prison for so long. When you come to my place, I'm gonna give you all the freedom in the world to do exactly what the fuck you want. Now, let me tell you right here, right now, that's the absolute worst thing you can do to a dog that you're bringing home from a shelter, especially. A lot of dogs from foster groups, they've been in homes, in foster homes, so they have a little bit of an idea of how to live their lives. But again, what you need to remember is a lot of people who are foster carers are so incredibly good at managing dogs that behavioral issues the dog might have might never actually surface in a foster family situation. They might not even know that the dog has some issues. And so when you bring that dog home and you go, poor little, prison breakout baby, you walk through the door, you unclip the leash, and you say, look here, puppy, my whole house is at your disposal. Do whatever you want. And that dog loses its fucking mind. It starts barking. It starts running in circles. It is parkouring off the couch to the chair and backflipping off the fucking stove in the kitchen. And you look at that dog and you go, oh my God, look how happy he is. Now, I can tell you one thing. That dog is not happy. He might have some temporary euphoria for being out of the pen and in a bigger place, but that dog is actually anxious as all hell. That is important to understand. These behaviors that you're seeing are almost frantic behaviors. They're not happy behaviors. And when you understand it from that point of view, it will hopefully be a little bit more easy to understand why we need to manage these dogs, why we need to slowly introduce them into our lives rather than just letting them free roam. Now, again, I work with a lot of dogs with behavioral issues. That's, pretty much what I do, whether that is separation anxiety, whether it's aggression, whether it's reactivity. Dogs don't come to me because they're behaving well, right? They come to me because they have issues. And in the past, I've done a fair bit of what we call board and training. And so a board and train is essentially someone sends their dog to a trainer for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. It really depends on the issues the dog has and the trainer themselves and how they're set up and everything. But generally, I would take dogs in for anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks to start working on their problems and to teach them how to behave, how to become just a good, pleasant member of society. One that is not going to cause friction in the family, one that's not going to bite another dog or person, a dog that's easy to walk, all of these things, right? Now, again, when dogs come to me, I give them absolutely zero freedom. We are in complete lockdown the second a new dog walks into my house. Why? Because that dog has no idea how to deal with freedom. That's why it ended up coming to me in the first place. It has had full freedom from day dot. It has learned through self-reinforcing behaviors to bark at things, to attack the windows, to bite the leash when it's going for a walk, to redirect onto the owners, to just everything is just mayhem, right? And when everything is complete chaos, complete order has to come in. Now, I want to talk about this at a later podcast, but we need to have a little bit of everything. We need to have a little bit of chaos because we need the dogs to just be dogs and do dog things, right? But we also need to have structure and management. If you have too much of one and too little of the other, it tends to go wrong in either of the directions where we're managing too much or too little. But when they come to me, they come from a background of 100% chaos. That's why people contacted me, because they're like, we either have to put this dog down or we have to get rid of it because we can't deal with it anymore, or you have to help us. So now my house is set up as a borderline prison camp, right? Because that dog does not move an inch without me saying it's okay for the dog to do that. So the dog's in a crate whenever I'm not out working with it, or it's locked in a run outside, right, to get a little bit of fresh air in between training sessions, and so on and so forth. When I bring that dog out of the crate, all my other dogs are locked away, right, because I can't have them meeting in the middle of the house, especially if I'm dealing with dog aggression issues, right? And so we run this place like a proper prison camp when a new dog first comes in, because I leave nothing to chance. I take no chances because it's my job to keep everyone safe and to set the dog up to learn as quickly as possible. And that's an important thing because dogs learn so quickly here. Why? Because I've eliminated any opportunity to make mistakes. Right? That dog might lunge and bark in the crate when my dogs walk past in the early days. That's not really a big problem because no one gets hurt, no one freaks out. We just get on with our lives, right? But until we start getting deeper into the board and train, it is management, management, management. That's just how it is because that's what I need to do in order to keep everyone safe, including my own dogs. And as we progress through the training, and depending on what we're dealing with, it depends on what the training involves. Does it involve learning how to play properly? Does it involve dealing with food resource guarding, right? Are we dealing with dog reactivity? Are we dealing with guest aggression? All of these things kind of set the board and train up to go in different direction, depending on what the problem is and what the desired outcome is. But so now we start working through one thing after the other. I start building up a rapport with the dog. I hand feed them all of their food. I play with them. I walk them on a daily basis. And all of this is for the dog it's for the dog to essentially learn to understand me, for me to learn what the dog wants, and for the dog to begin trusting me and realize that, hey, I'm not the bad guy. I'm not out to hurt anyone. I'm not out to, you know, make anyone's lives worse. In fact, the opposite. But again, when a dog's been taken away from an environment where they've had full freedom, they very often don't understand that. I'm automatically perceived as the bad guy because the dog's stressed to shit when they're here, right? Even when they manage the first 72 hours, there's usually a lot of dogs won't eat, right? They might end up having some diarrhea, right? Because being in the situation that they've not put themselves in, right, but been allowed to work themselves up to. That new situation going from complete chaos to complete structure, that takes some time to work through. And I mean, I've never been to prison, but I imagine it's very similar. It's going to be a ton of anxiety and and you just kind of have to learn super quickly how the new environment that you live in works, because if you don't, you'll probably get into a whole lot of trouble, right? So I imagine it is a little bit similar to that. But as we progress through the training, as the dog begins to trust me, as we begin exposing the dog to triggers, whether that is my girlfriend or friends of mine, if it's a human issue, or whether it's other dogs, if it's a dog issue, as we start introducing them to these things in slow, controlled manners with very black and white rules around everything, the anxiety starts dying away. Why? Because the dog goes, I know exactly how to succeed in this environment with this guy. And that is when the proper learning starts taking place and the dog starts making good decisions. And that is so incredibly important, because just running a full riot all the time, not only is it exhausting, it's also stressful. Because if you have no one to look to for direction. So if a dog doesn't fully trust its owner or doesn't see them as someone that wants that dog to succeed, they feel like they're on their own. And that is a huge problem. All right, so what I'm trying to get to with this rambling here is that freedom is a privilege, not a right. Freedom is something that the dog needs to earn through displaying good behavior, through showing the dog that it can follow rules, through showing that the dog wants to understand what we're laying out for it. And even if the dog maybe at that point doesn't understand why this is good for the dog, a lot of the dogs that come here, they come riddled with anxiety and stress because they always feel like they need to look over their shoulder. They're always looking for an opportunity to try and push their owner to do something with them, to bark at them to get their food quicker, to nip at them to get them to try to play. But all of these are just, they create such frantic dogs that when we then lock them down, the dog freaks out because they're like, holy shit, I have never sat in one spot for more than 2 minutes my entire life unless I've been essentially passed out from exhaustion, right? But as the dog begins to settle, as they start fitting into our routine, as we start exposing them to more and more things, building their confidence, building their trust in me, what happens is the dog starts earning freedom, right? So now when my missus and I sit down to watch some TV after dinner, I'll lock away my dogs and I'll give this dog that's staying with us some time to free roam the house, to sniff around, to check things out, to just do regular dog stuff. But what happens is when the dog starts earning that freedom, when they're coming out of the crate, and I say, hey man, just go do your own thing. The change that we see is that the dog doesn't come out of that crate at 100 miles an hour and start pacing, drooling, barking at birds, whatever it may be. They come out with a whole different mindset, a calm, controlled, curious mindset, because they're like, hey, we've done a lot of training together, but I don't actually know who you are just as a person that lives around the house and chills and does things, right? So now they might look at us from a distance. They might come up and give us a sniff. They might nudge us a little, like, hey, will you give me a pat? And then they'll toddle off and they'll sniff some things. They'll drink from the other dog's water bowl, right? They're earning that freedom. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Freedom is a privilege. It's not a right. And that privilege is earned through good behavior, through learning how to settle and not be anxious for prolonged periods of time, and to just become a better citizen. That's it. Right? Now I can give the dog more freedom to make decisions. But at this point, I will also hold them accountable if they make the wrong decision. If they run up to the door where my other dogs are and they start fighting the door, a punishment's going to happen because that is not appropriate behavior. And again, the more freedom the dog gets because he or she understands more, the more I can give clear consequences to the dog, the quicker they stop making poor decisions, start making good decisions, the faster we move away from any form of punishment or pressure. And it just becomes a happy-go-lucky family that lives together and has a good time together. And that is exactly what everyone should be doing with their dogs when a new dog comes into the home. All right, so it's meat and potatoes time. What do we do? How do we do it? How do we create this structure? How do we set our dogs up for success? And how do we make sure we don't end up having problems all the time? So it all begins with management. So management is utilizing a crate. A crate works whether it's for puppies or fully grown dogs, doesn't really matter. Then it's a playpen if it's a puppy. Playpens obviously don't work well for bigger dogs because they can just jump out of them. But that again, that's where we replace the playpen with a crate. Now, playpen is essentially just a little fenced off area that the dog has a little bit more room to move around in. And, we can put some water in there. We might be able to put a toy in there. Just for the puppy to have a little bit more space to move around, to check things out, to sniff the dogs, like my dogs through the playpen. Obviously, they can do that through the crate as well. But this just gives them a little bit more of an opportunity to move around and enjoy themselves a little. Then as the dog or the puppy starts coming out of their confinement spaces a little bit, I put them on what we call an umbilical cord. And an umbilical cord is literally just a leash wrapped around my waist and then attached to the dog's collar. So wherever I go, that dog has to follow me, right? They don't get to roam around freely. They're not allowed to go pick up shoes, get into trouble, and start resource guarding things. They are strapped to me the whole time. Now, when I'm doing umbilical cord training, I do not pay any attention to the dog. I literally just go about my day, whether I'm doing dishes, whether I'm sitting down to read the newspaper, whatever it is, I just go about my day, and the leash, the tether that I have between myself and the dog makes the dog just follow. It is important not to give your dog too much attention when you're doing umbilical cord training, because if they start jumping on you, if they start going like, hey, I don't actually know what we're doing, that can very quickly lead to undesirable behavior being reinforced. The whole purpose of the umbilical cord training is literally for the dog to learn to just follow you, right? It's not to elicit attention from you. It is just giving them the free roam of the house, but under your consistent and persistent management. That's essentially all that it is. Now, as the dog starts getting more and more freedom outside of its crate and playpen, we tether the dog. So tether training is literally just tying the dog up to something. So what I might do is I clip a leash on the dog. I might tie that leash to my couch, which is super heavy, that, no smaller dog is going to be able to drag around. I don't know about a Great Dane. Those big fuckers might be able to drag one of them around. But most dogs are not going to even make a dent in moving my couch, right? So now I clip the leash on, I tie it to my couch, I walk away, I go about my day. But now the whole point is that the dog is outside of the crate and playpen confinement, but they're still confined to a certain degree. They're still locked into a position, and they can move around a little bit there, but they can't just free roam the house. Now, at this point, if the dog is starting to show some really good behavioral decisions, I may start to release my dogs into the house. My dogs don't really care about other dogs that much. They might go up and have a quick sniff and say hello, but most of the time they just sleep on their beds and don't do a whole lot. But now we get to have the dog that I'm working with be around a more natural life setting. And then over time, we get to a point where we're going to remove the tether as well. At this point, I implement what we call a drag line. So a drag line is essentially just a thin leash with the loop that you would normally hold on the leash cut off. And the reason why we cut that off is because we're going to clip this leash to the dog or the puppy, and we're literally just going to let them drag it around the house. And the reason why I cut off the loop is because I don't want them to walk around something, the loop get attached, and they become stuck and freaking out and strangling themselves, essentially, right? So that's why, like, whenever I have a dog on a drag line, it's always managed by me. Like all of these things that I'm mentioning here, except for the true confinement, which is within the crate or the playpen. Whenever I do all of the other things, that's when I bring the dog out under supervision, because I want to make sure they don't start making mistakes. If I have a puppy, I don't want the puppy on a tether to suddenly start getting ready to go number two inside my house, right? So I have to actually pay attention to what's happening. And if I have another dog staying here, if that dog suddenly starts growling at my dogs or displaying some form of reactive behavior, then I have to step in and I have to deal with that right away. So tying your dog up and walking away to do a 2-hour Zoom chat is not what we're talking about here. This is all training and management to ease the dog into earning that privilege of freedom and fitting into your life and your structure. That's what it is. Now, another thing that is super important is to remove resources, right? So what do we mean by free? Sorry, I read the word free and then everything just became wrong. But what do we mean by resources? Well, a lot of things can be valuable resources to a dog, but the most common ones are food and toys, right? These are things that the dog finds generally very valuable, and they might try and possess them. They might, try and steal them, run away with them, etc., etc. But I also do things like I don't leave socks and underwear lying on the ground, because puppies love the smell of a dirty crotch sitting on the ground or some stinky toy jam flopping around, right? And so they're going to want to take these things, pick them up, run away with them. What happens when a dog picks up a shoe and starts running away with it? Most people start running after them and screaming, "No, no, no." And the puppy goes, "Oh my God, this is the best fucking game I've had all day. I'm going to pick up more stuff because then I get chased more." Right? Don't chase them. Don't try to fight them over space. This is where the drag line becomes your best friend. Because when I hear the little pitter patters of tiny little puppy paws come past me, the first thing I do is I look up. When I see that puppy, if that puppy is holding anything in its mouth, I'm going to immediately step on that leash. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. I'm just going to say, "No, step on the leash." I'm going to take the thing out of the puppy's mouth and I'm going to pop them back in the playground. Right? So this would technically be punishing the dog for making a mistake. But again, if you spend your entire life running around after dogs, yelling no and trying to punish them for everything they do, now we end up just creating chaos. And again, the more you talk to a dog, because dogs are non-verbal, the less they're going to listen. I want all my talking to be done with my body, with a simple either yes or no, and then through some form of restraint, like a drag line, or if you have a rock solid place command, send the dog away, and so on and so forth. But yeah, don't chase the puppy when they have something, because that's going to turn into a fun little game. But another really important reason why we use the drag line is if I have a dog that's a little bit prone to some resource guarding. And resource guarding is what we call possession aggression. So the dog has something valuable that it possesses and you start approaching and the dog starts displaying aggressive behavior towards you to try and drive you away from that possession. That's possession aggression, which is more commonly known as resource guarding. But if I have a dog like this running around the house and they happen to find something despite all my insane ADHD cleaning effort, from time to time you just miss something. Now what happens is I see the dog has this thing, I might get up and start approaching them. If the dog then begins to display aggressive behavior towards me, if I continue forwards, I'm going to create more conflict. I'm going to be more likely to trigger the dog into trying to attack me. However, if the dog has a leash dragging behind them, I can grab that leash from 3-4 meters away. I can just give the dog a quick pop and say no and move them away into their crate. right? And so these are all management techniques that help us be clearer to the dogs, but also don't put ourselves in a ton of conflict with the dog. Because creating accidental games, putting too much pressure on the dog by moving into their space, all of these can lead to further problems if we don't have a management in place to begin with. Now we start moving into the accountability side of things. So, accountability, holding a dog accountable for its actions, is one of the best ways to modify behavior and to set the dog up for success and teach them to be a polite citizen in the world. So, what I mean by accountability is I mean having clear, calm understanding of what's happening, not pushing the boundaries, and also, of course, not letting them get away with anything. You have to understand dogs are opportunists, and if you start giving to them, they are going to try to take much more. So when I introduce a boundary, I follow through on that boundary every single time. And there's a few things here that's important. Probably two of the most important ones for me is number one, no storming through doorways. A dog that rushes through a door, that pushes past you, that hits his shoulders as you're opening the door, rushes through, they set themselves in a rushing state of mind. And so now they get out and they start looking for fuckery immediately. Like, oh, what can I chase? What can I do? Whoa. They're already aroused and amped up and they're ready to just cause chaos. So essentially what I do is whenever I start opening a door in front of a dog, I have them on a leash. The second the dog moves forwards, I close the door. I say no first, the condition punishment marker that I've taught the dog. So I say no as I'm closing the door and I give the dog a quick pop on the leash. Very quickly, that dog is going to learn, oh, rushing through doorways, really bad idea, never doing that again. And so now when we walk through the door together, we walk through the door in a calm state of mind, but we're also walking through the door like we are a team and like we are doing something together. These things can seem really benign and stupid, but they do actually produce a big result primarily for the dog. Because the dog goes, all right, cool, I'm not on my own. You don't want me in this chaotic state of mind all the time. You want me to look at you. You want me to pay attention to you, etc., etc. Which leads us to the next one, which is no pulling on the leash. All right, pulling on the leash is a hardline rule for me. We never ever allow it in any dog under any circumstance. The second the dog begins pulling on the leash, they disassociate from you. The dog is now under pressure, which is amping them up, frustrating them, and increasing their arousal. And I have no way of speaking to the dog anymore. And I have elaborate videos on how to teach a dog how to loose lead walk. Most dogs I can teach loose lead walk in anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, depending on the dog's level of arousal and their prior learning, etc. But yeah, if you're going to start working on one thing with your dog today, make it not pulling on the leash. Because the second the dog's pulling on the leash, he's not going to hear you. And now you start fighting against each other rather than walking nicely together and being a team. No running away from me. I don't want a dog. And again, look, there are extreme fear cases where this rule might bend a little bit depending on where in the training we are. But at the end of the day, I don't want the dog to control the space around them by running away from me and therefore getting what they want. Whether that is running away with something in their mouth, running away from me because they're scared of me, right? I want the dog to be close to me and understand that in my presence, they are safe, they are looked after, but they're also held accountable. Right? I can't tell you how many houses I've gone to where people say, it takes us 15, 20 minutes to catch the dog when we bring out the leash, right? And so now you're already fighting even before the walk's begun. What do you think you're going to do on the walk itself? Well, you're going to be fighting more, right? But I have a case now that I'll be going to in the next couple of days. That is, every time they try to take a harness off a dog, he fucking bites the hell out of them. He rips them up. And you go like, no, like these are just not appropriate things, which makes it, which gets me into the last bit, which is no using aggression against me. I'm not going to aggress towards you, but that also means you're not allowed to aggress towards me, right? We have to have that accountability. I'm going to be very clear and firm with you. That does not mean I'm going to be aggressive towards you. Okay, I say to all my students and all my clients, if you need to punish a dog, that should never be emotional. You cannot be angry with a dog. You just have to tell them, hey, this is dangerous behavior. It could be dangerous for you, could be dangerous for me, but we have to take it off the table forever and ever. Right. So no storming through doors. That sets the dog in a high state of arousal. No pulling on the leash. That creates frustration, which can lead to reactivity and aggression. And eliminates any form of communication that we have between myself and the dog. No running away from me, because I have to be able to make you comfortable in my space, and I don't want you to continue controlling your own space because, again, too much freedom. That's what's led to this problem. And finally, no overt use of aggression in any way, form, or shape. If I have a dog with severe aggression issues and that dog growls at me, I will take that as communication. I will go, all right, cool. We moved a little bit too quickly. I'm going to let you get away with this one. But don't think I'm not going to hold you accountable. Hold you accountable in the future for this. Now, all of this management, all of this structure, all of this hard work, it eliminates any ambiguity. And ambiguity is probably one of the biggest drivers of anxiety, over arousal, reactivity, separation anxiety, puppy problems, right? Eliminate ambiguity. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, but dogs do not operate in gray zones. We want to make the world as black and white as possible for our puppies and for our dogs. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to succeed at something, you're going to be stressed. It's the same with dogs. When they continue to try behaviors over and over and over again, they get more and more amped up. They just met with unclear communication or attempted punishment over and over again. They just become frustrated and they escalate their behaviors. And now we are literally just fucking butting heads 24/7. That's the absolute opposite of what we want. Absolute clear communication creates an absolutely wonderful relationship. It's that simple. And all of this combined will take away your stress, your dog's stress, your anxiety, your dog's anxiety. Everyone will sit on the couch and chill out and never fight about anything. And that's exactly what we want from our dogs. We want them to be awesome companions. We want them to be awesome members of society. We want them to listen, but we also need them to understand, hey, there are certain wolf-like behaviors you're not allowed to do in this world that you live in here with me. So all of this combined, well, it just becomes a wonderful little dance that we do together, and it's awesome. And again, it takes away so many problem behaviors so quickly. And there is nothing worse than just running around being stressed and anxious all the time. That is, look, I walk into so many houses where people, they have black rings under their eyes. They're on the verge of crying because the dog's driving them nuts one way or another. It doesn't necessarily mean the dog's being aggressive towards them, but they might have a dog that spends 4 hours barking at the fridge where his ball sits on top, right? And it's disrupting everyone's lives. And the dog doesn't have the outlet that he needs. And yeah, again, now we just live with the shitty house guest that we over time begin to resent. And that is absolutely the complete opposite of what we want from these beautiful little beasts that we have brought into our homes and that we love hanging out with, that we share our couch with, that we give pats to, that we laugh at when they do stupid shit. Right? That's what most people want from their dog. They don't want this out of control psychopath. They just want their dog to be chill and have a good time with them. And that's what the curse of freedom is such an enemy to, especially in the early days. And look, I think it's probably worth mentioning, I'm about to finish up here now, but it's probably worth mentioning, this eliminating freedom for the dog, that is temporary. That is not forever. The purpose of any form of training is to give the dog as much freedom as possible, because they know how to make good choices. They know how to not be an asshole. They know how to behave. They know how to be awesome little dogs, right? So yeah, hard work for short periods of time sets you up for a lifetime of success. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter what you think, that is the answer to everything in the early stages of starting something new. So get on with it. And again, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. And now go train your dog. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beastly Talks. I hope you found it interesting and that you'll join me for the next one as well. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it so that more people can hear about it. Or if you think this particular episode would benefit a family member, friend or colleague, be sure to share it with them directly. You can follow me on social media at Viking Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. Thank you for your support and keep training your dog.